One of the remarkable things about this crisis has been Taiwan's exceptional performance here in terms of suppressing the virus without a lockdown and without community spread. And it is a national narrative and a success to Taiwan, but it's a global problem. So Audrey, my question for you is, what was the narrative of Taiwan's success? Do you think that it was a shared nationalist identity that pulled the Taiwanese together, or do you think it was a shared participation in solving the problem? And what can we extrapolate around the world and to replicate the success?
There's actually two crises at the same time. There is the pandemic, which is the biological one, and then there is the anxiety and fear and outrage and conspiracy theories and panic buying that is collectively referred to as the infodemic. A good analogy is that if those ideas of conspiracy theory, if you do not put out the vaccines of mind, that is to say, deliberative, intentional communication materials of basic scientific understanding, then people would suffer actually from a epistemic void, because they don't know really what's going on, and they tend to fill in whatever the mental projection is, which tend to divide people more and make things even worse, right? And so in Taiwan, in very early on, we established the fast, fair, fun principles. And I talk about fast, right? Anyone who care enough about asking anything about the counter-pandemic strategy can call 1922 and get their questions answered. Or the journalists will ask their questions in a much more elaborate way and get the daily 2 p.m. briefing understanding. But even that is not sufficient to quell people's fear, for example, about the lack of protective gears and protective masks. We had a very early on a panic buying of medical masks when it was first distributed in convenience stores and pharmacies. And there was a civic technologist with the name Howard Wu in Tainan City, developed this very simple idea. He coded a map on which that he invites his friends and families to report which parts of the city still have the mask in stock. So you can see the green ones are the ones that still have masks in stock, and the red ones are the ones that have run out of stock. So just by this very simple gesture, he made sure that people can self-report where can they spend less time queuing needlessly, and then they can queue fruitfully. But he didn't anticipate this get national press attention, and so he very quickly had to shut the website down because he owed Google, because he used the Google Map API, $20K US after just 2 days. And so he had to shut it down. But one of the people using his app was me. And so I talked to our premier, our prime minister, and say, we need to trust citizens with open data. And I think this is one of the most interesting things in Taiwan's history of building open data and open APIs, in that when we switched to ration the mask through the pharmacies, anyone can use their single-payer national health card, which covers 99.99% of Taiwanese population. They can get those masks and at nearby pharmacy, and that is a machine-to-machine system that publishes the stock level of every pharmacy by every 30 seconds. And more than 100 different civic technologists developed maps, chatbots, voice assistants, and so on. So it becomes essentially a distributed ledger in which that you can only update every 30 seconds, but without any possibility of go back in time to change the numbers. And if people queue in line, finally get their 3 masks per week at a time, or 9 masks per 2 weeks later on, they expect after a couple minutes to see in their phone that the stock level of that pharmacy will deplete by 9 or 10 if they are a child. If it doesn't deplete, or if rather increases, then they will just call 1922 right and report this anomaly to the CECC. And I spent the time to talk about this in detail because this captures, I think, what's at the root of the idea of a data collaborative. It's everybody holding each other accountable, everybody ensuring that there really is a fair distribution because they can witness by themselves, and independent analysts can write more dashboards to show there's an oversupply in certain areas, undersupply in certain areas. There's people who work very long hours, so they cannot collect at pharmacy, so we have to work with convenience store that open 24 hours a day. And it's already an international narrative because a month after we developed this code, which is all open source, by the way, people in South Korea use the Taiwan model to convince their government that publishing the number every week or every day at the end of the day is not enough. You have to do a real-time API just like Taiwan did. And so the first mass rationing availability map in South Korea was written by Finjan Kyung in Tainan, in Taiwan. Even though he doesn't speak Korean, he speaks JavaScript, which is what's important here. And so this enabled a new breed of civic technologists who work like civil engineers, because more than half a population, 10 million people, use their work. And so the fairness of all kinds, I think, is at its core. And at this moment, there's more than 90% of people who have used our mass rationing system, and the remaining 10, maybe they have already plenty of mass in storage before the pandemic. They can also use that app to dedicate their uncollected quota to international friends for humanitarian aid. So you can see actually 300,000 people's names in Taiwan can help us that dedicated more than 5 million medical masks internationally. And you see when high-level officials start wearing this mask that prints made in Taiwan, then people approach us and say, oh, we also want the blueprint that you can automate the production of 2 million masks a day in a small automated factory. And we also share the blueprints to many other jurisdictions as well. And so the fairness is definitely not just national, it is really an international perspective. So that's a fair pillar of fast, fair, and fun.
Yuval, does this make you more optimistic about these global challenges that we face?
Yeah, I think that with many of these global challenges, so the solution has to be global, but of course it's rooted, it's based in individual countries. The most important thing is not to fall into the trap of thinking that there is a contradiction between nationalism and globalism and that we need to choose. There is no contradiction. Nationalism is about loving your compatriots, not about hating foreigners. And in many situations, like in this pandemic or with global climate change, if you really love your compatriots and you want to take care of them, you have to cooperate with foreigners. So to be a good nationalist, you're also have to be a globalist. There is no contradiction. And I think we are seeing it with initiatives like the one we just heard in Taiwan. And also a very important thing is that some people think that to deal with these emergencies, whether the pandemic or global climate change, we need some kind of authoritarian regime that will tell everybody what to do. Otherwise, there is no way to reach a consensus. But the example of Taiwan proves the opposite. And not just Taiwan. In this pandemic, it's true that authoritarian PRC have dealt with the epidemic better than the democratic USA, but they are not the only examples. Many of the countries which have dealt with the epidemic the best, whether it's in East Asia, like Taiwan and South Korea, whether it's New Zealand or Greece or Germany, they are democracies. Because generally, a well-informed and self-motivated population is far more efficient than an ignorant and policed population. With a well-informed population in democratic countries, instead of wasting resources on policing the people, you can actually benefit from their initiatives, and this is the best way forward.